There are many Black people obsessed with having a seat at the table that they will either totally disassociate themselves from Blackness or they'll become the infiltrators cosplaying Black empowerment. Don't be fooled by the freeform locks, dashikis, and kufis. People don't trust the church. Hey y'all, and welcome to Bcentric TV. Welcome to Bcentric TV. If you have not subscribed to this channel, please be sure to do that. Please be sure to do that. Hey y'all, I'm Nita, and welcome to Bcentric TV, where I give my commentary, social, and cultural analysis on beauty, fashion, wellness, hair, and representation regarding the Black community. I also do mini docs on some well-known, but mostly underrepresented and unappreciated pioneers in all the categories I mentioned before. If you are new here, welcome. I hope you enjoy this video and feel inspired to subscribe. For those of you who have been here, I sure hope you are already subscribed. If so, thank you. If not, why? What's going on? Hit that button, like and share. Now, let's get into the video. For generations, the Black church was more than a place of worship. It was where Black people organized, celebrated, and survived. But as neighborhoods change and younger generations drift away, the church's role is fading. The question is, what fills that space now? Some weeks ago, or maybe a month or so ago, TheGrio released an article covering how choirs are dwindling due to the decline in church attendance, specifically in Brooklyn, New York. The borough was highlighted because it has been nicknamed the borough of churches, having a church on almost every corner. The article describes how since the pandemic, many churches noticed these significant attendance decreases, with many members opting to watch service virtually and others not attending at all. But here's the thing, it's not exclusive to Brooklyn. It's happening everywhere. While the Black church has historically been the cornerstone of the Black community, attendance is declining due to factors such as gentrification, cultural shifts, and generational differences, raising questions about the future of activism, cultural identity, and the overall wellness of the Black community. These empty pews did not happen overnight, so let's delve into what's really going on, because it's important to remember what the church once was: the foundation of Black culture, music, and political power. Speaking of Christianity is such a loaded conversation, and for the purpose of staying on track for this video, I won't be diving into who wrote the Bible, when, where Christianity began, or anything specific to the religion per se, or at any point on this channel, to be honest, because this is not a spiritual or religious channel. That's why I tried to make this video as ambiguous as I possibly could, knowing, how some people can be real nosy. My religion or spiritual beliefs are irrelevant. With that being said, this is not a Black people shouldn't be a Christian type of video. I am not here to tell you what higher power to rely in, but I will delve into why Black people are denouncing their Christianity. But first things first, let's talk about the historical role of the Black church. In the 1600s, British missionaries traveled the colonies trying to convert enslaved Africans and indigenous people. Slaveholders resisted at first, worried that Christian baptism might force them to free their slaves. That fear threatened both their wallets and their power. So by 1706, the colonial laws made it clear: baptism did not mean freedom. Christianity became a tool of control. Missionaries even wrote slave catechisms, watered down religious manuals that taught obedience to masters as part of God's will. Pretty much twisting the scriptures to justify slavery, but the enslaved made faith their own. They saw something different in the Bible, especially in the story of Exodus. The Israelites in bondage, crying out for freedom, mirrored their own reality. It became the foundation of a hope that God would one day deliver them too. Worship happened in three main ways: in white-led, segregated churches, in independent black congregations, and in hidden hush harbors deep in the woods where enslaved people blended African traditions with Christian prayers and songs. Despite persecutions, leaders like Andrew Bryant in Savannah, Georgia, where I'm from, built congregations. In the late 1700s, his small gatherings of enslaved worshipers grew into the first African Baptist church. In the North, Richard Allen and Absalom Jones founded Free African Society in Philadelphia, which gave rise to the AME Church and other independent black congregations. Churches became sanctuaries, schools, and organizing hubs during Reconstruction. And sometimes faith became the spark for outright rebellion. In 1831, Nat Turner, a deeply religious preacher, claimed God had given him visions of liberation. He led the largest slave rebellion in the United States history in Southampton County, Virginia. By the 20th century, the black church wasn't just about worship, it was the heartbeat of black activism. During the Great Migration, millions of black Southerners carried their traditions to the North, fueling the growth of urban congregations. Lay members such as choirs, ushers, deacons, and Sunday school teachers held the church together, giving it grassroots strength. By the 1950s and 60s, that infrastructure became the backbone of the civil rights movement. Leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and countless local pastors used pulpits not only to preach salvation, but to demand justice. But this era revealed internal conflict. Some leaders like Thurgood Marshall and before him Booker T. Washington believed in proving black worth through morality and entrepreneurship. They feared mass protests and civil disobedience would derail progress. On the other side, leaders like Dr. King argued that justice demanded confrontation, like marches, sit-ins, and boycotts. The divide got so deep that it split the largest black denomination at the time, the National Baptist Convention. King and his allies broke away, forming the Progressive Baptist Convention to support direct action. Meanwhile, in crowded church basements and cramped offices, strategies were laid out. Marches were planned and freedom songs rehearsed. These spaces became war rooms for liberation. And when people filled the streets, the marches looked and felt like church services. Beyond politics, the black church shaped the culture. Out of slavery's sorrow came the spirituals, songs of pain, hope, and coded resistance. These spirituals evolved into gospel, blues, jazz, R&B, and believe it or not, eventually hip-hop. The rise of gospel choirs in the 20th century, led by pioneers like Thomas Dorsey and Mahalia Jackson, took sacred music to a global stage. Gospel became not just church music, but the soundtrack of resilience and joy for Black America. Rituals like call and response, the ring shout, and the modern praise break preserved African rhythms inside Christian worship. And the fellowship, the potlucks, the ushers, the church mothers, the Sunday suits created a culture of belonging that extended far beyond Sunday morning. The Black church gave Black America both its battle cries and its soundtrack. So that's the historical role of the Black church. But what about today? What does the picture look like in 2025, especially in places like Brooklyn, where the church once sat at the center of Black community life? Let's start with the elephant in the room.
Hey, what are you people doing?
We're gentrifying. It's all good.
Gentrification. In neighborhoods like Bed-Stuy and Crown Heights, rising rents and housing costs have pushed thousands of Black families out. Between 2010 and 2020, Crown Heights alone lost nearly 19,000 Black residents while gaining about 15,000 white residents. And when families leave, church pews empty out. It's not that people stop believing, it's that they were literally priced out of the neighborhood. And that decline in attendance isn't just numbers. It means fewer voices in the choir, fewer ushers at the door, fewer kids in Sunday school, and the church cannot grow without young people. Let's take a look at the Google definition for gentrification. It's defined as the process where an urban, aka black, neighborhood transforms from a lower income area into a more affluent one, often due to an influx of wealthier residents and businesses, leading to rising property values and rents. This often results in the displacement of long-term lower income residents who can no longer afford to live there, and a significant change in the neighborhood's culture, character, and amenities. Many of the businesses brought in do not serve the community and are usually chain restaurants and high-end grocery stores, not many local businesses. Corporations offer the residents home buying offers they think they can't refuse. The real estate predators know their offers are pennies compared to what they plan to make in return. The residents that refuse are usually worn down to sell after being harassed, serve frivolous lawsuits, and among other unethical practices.
The scene in South Memphis ended with deputies, neighbors, and even a city councilwoman stepping in to help a woman keep her home. Such a story here. The sheriff's office says deputies were called after a family member reached out to councilwoman Yolanda Cooper Sutton. They learned an eviction wasn't authorized by the sheriff's office, and with proof the woman's taxes had actually been paid. A court injunction halted the removal. You see everything outside of the house right there. What a mess. Deputies, some even off duty, volunteered alongside neighbors and family to move that woman's belongings back inside of her home, ensuring she could remain safely there. Nice to see.
Gentrification is praised by some and demonized by many. High level, gentrification could be viewed as a positive, bringing in new businesses, cleaning up the streets, rehabbing and building new homes, healthier food options. But at what cost? Well, it tends to cost racially marginalized people their homes. For many, the only homes they ever knew. The home in the neighborhood where Pop and Big Mama were only allowed to purchase from back in the day. The house they may have struggled to keep through decades of the ever-changing economy. The home where all the cousins meet up for sleepovers, and the house the family's probably going to end up fighting over when the grands are gone. You know, y'all really looking to trust, looking to have getting a trust, update them deeds when and if need be. But at least they have a home to fight over. You know, that's more than many of us can say, right? According to the National Association of Realtors, in 2023, Black home ownership rates rose to 44.7%, the largest annual gain among all racial groups. Yet, it still lags behind white, Asian, and Hispanic households, with whites leading at 72.4%. Despite these gains, Black homeowners face disproportionate challenges. In 39 states, they are more than likely to spend over 30% of their income on housing costs. Mortgage assets also reflects the inequities, with 21% of Black applicants denied loans compared to the 11% of whites and the 9% of Asian applicants. Rising insurance costs add to this burden. While the national median climbed to 53% over the past decade, Black homeowners paid the highest rates in 2023 at $1,360, surpassing Asians at $1,330, whites at $1,310, and Hispanics at $1,300. Given that information, we see the disparities when it comes to gaining home ownership, and then add on groups of Black homeowners being displaced. Where does this leave the mid to lower income Black people? And I don't want to hear get a higher income, because like the saying goes, if it were that easy, we'd all have it or be doing it. And truth be told, capitalism is an economic system that is set up to have the have and have-nots. But the nots don't deserve to have nothing. You know, everyone doesn't aspire to be rich, but everyone aspires to be able to attain basic needs with a few wants without the struggle. The challenges of the housing and economic instability are profound, and they speak to a system that disproportionately affects Blacks' households. Yet, amidst these systemic hurdles, there are institutions that have long been a source of strength and resilience. The Black church, for instance, has served as a cornerstone of the community, and even as congregations change, one of its most powerful and enduring elements remain: the choir. Reference in the article, Concord Baptist, the oldest historical Black church in Brooklyn. The choir once had 100 voices back in the 2000s. Today, it's about 30. Choirs are more than music. They're a cultural memory. They connect us to our ancestors, they uplift communities, and they remind us that the Black church isn't just about sermons, but about the sound, rhythm, and identity. Now, here's where it gets tough. With declining attendance comes financial strain. Churches that once had the resources to run food pantries, after school programs, or even just keep up massive historic buildings are struggling. For many congregations, choirs are the glue holding people together, even when the institution itself is at risk. Choirs themselves have become the smaller communities within the larger church, being some of the most devoted members there. Listening to the choir at church was always my favorite part of the service, and many times the only part of the service I gave my undivided attention to. You know, I personally receive a lot of my ministry through music. That's when I feel most spiritually connected. You know, another challenge the article highlights is music education and the lack thereof. You know, back in the day, music classes were standard in public schools. Today, they're nearly gone. Now, when I think of it, you know, my son is in the 7th grade, and I cannot recall a time where he has taken a music class. You know, overall, fewer kids are learning how to sing or how to play instruments at school, which means fewer young people are ready to step into choirs. And without that next generation, the sound we've come to associate with the Black church is in danger of fading, right along with its members. Proof in that statement is why BET could award Glorilla, who's a secular rap artist, and may I add, very secular, you know, a gospel award when there is a plethora of true gospel artists who probably deserved it more. But hey, that's music politics for you, and clearly it was God's will, so who am I? Who am I to say otherwise? According to Pew Research, approximately 28% of U.S. adults are religiously unaffiliated. In 2007, it was approximately 16%. As millennials became of age, the decrease in interest in organized religion increased. Pew describes these people as the nuns, not the same nuns as Sister Mary Clarence and her girls. Some may identify themselves as atheist, agnostic, or none of that. You know, most of the nuns in their research state they do believe in some form of a higher power. In that data, people who identify themselves as spiritual versus religious are included as nuns. Keep in mind, these are spiritual people who do not identify with an organized religious practice such as Islam and Christianity. I have heard many people who are Christians state they are not religious but spiritual.
I'm gonna hold your hand when I say this.
I hate to break it to you, but you are religious. And that's okay. Christianity and Islam are, you know, some of the most religious religions. I think, you know, some believers like to separate themselves because of the stigma that comes with, you know, the uber religious people and how toxic they can be. You know, I get it, but you're religious. With that being said, some of the other reasons younger generations have not experienced or denounced their religion are skepticism, doubt, questioning of the teachings, bad experiences, or simply, they don't have time or feel the need to go. For Black people, many of those reasons are relatable, especially when it comes to skepticism, doubt, teachings, and bad experiences. Unfortunately, some young people's first sexual encounter was in the church. And I'm not talking about with another member in the Sunshine Choir. Many of these church leaders have done nothing but lead their members to disappointment with lies, deceit, gluttony, infidelity, and thievery. The scandals. We have all witnessed questionable situations and downright heathenism from some of these pastors, from Bishop Eddie Long and his disgusting essay acts towards underage young men, Pastor Jamal Bryant's incapability of keeping his peen in his pants, T.D. Jakes' questionable friendship with Diddy, Pastor Bling Bling or Pastor Scammer, aka Bishop Lamar Whitehead, and in recent news, we have Apostle David Taylor, who used physical and psychological abuse to coerce victims to solicit millions in donations. If you want a full breakdown of David Taylor's situation, after you watch this video, look in the description for the link. I said after. This man is a crook and a whore who used his power and influence to force members of his congregation to do ungodly things in the name of Jesus. I know many of you all are like, they ain't victims, they're grown. Two things can be true, as most of you all know, but keep this in mind. The mind is powerful, but it can also be weak. And when someone has a weak sense of self, it doesn't take much for external forces to control it. Have grace. I remember years ago, a former co-worker was a member of Bishop Eddie Long's congregation. I asked her, why she still attends his church after everything that's happened. Her words, everyone deserves forgiveness. I was truly taken aback because I could not understand it. And guess what? I still can't. Because girl, what? I'm all for giving grace to victims, but you perpetrators, you better ask God for it because it ain't coming from me. While many of these examples are on a large scale, rest assured they are happening in small churches too. Public shaming contributes to the distrust of the church. Check out my video on shame culture. The link will be in the description. No one wants to go to church and they're constantly being told they're an abomination. No one wants to go to church and deal with the constant gossip. No one wants to go to church knowing the pastor is knocking down the ushers. Maybe some of the deacons too. No one wants to go to church and be demonized for wearing hoop earrings in the color turquoise. Yeah, that one's personal. And when it comes to Black people in religion, specifically ADOS, many find it hard to praise a God who allowed our people to be enslaved for over 400 years, questioning the validity of the Bible and Jesus himself, because our ancestors had other spiritual practices which ended up being deemed witchcraft and heathenism by white colonizers and slave owners. Black women are the primary attendees of the Black church, but many are opting out due to misogynistic and outdated rhetoric and practices towards women. Black men left the church due to poor leadership and teachings. Some also feel the Black church has become too feminine, but that could be because they don't go. Just a theory. Also some feel the Black church has not been the backbone it once was, shying away from true activism and community support, becoming performative, political puppets, and community infiltrators instead. But let's get back to the economics of it all. The racial gap irritates me every time I see it, mainly because I know there are many highly competent Black people capable of careers that pay well and entrepreneurship if they just had the capital. We are not lazy. We work some of the most physically and mentally demanding jobs. However, you'll have people tell you there is nothing systemic that has limited us for generations. Let's not talk about the ones who have made it and then turn the lights off behind them once they do. Some believe racism stopped in 1964 when the Civil Rights Act was passed. How ignorant of them. In 2021, the typical white household had 9.2 times as much wealth as the typical black household, and not much has changed since. So between gentrification, rejection of organized religion, church choirs diminishing, and financial challenges, the black church is not okay. Times have changed is a phrase we've heard our parents say, and now a phrase you may hear millennials often say. As someone on TikTok said, we are now becoming the elders since Gen X ain't doing their job. Don't fight me. I'm just saying what they said. But nah, we're not the elders. We still have the silent generation, boomers, and Gen X here with us. But millennials have been very influential in society, having a much more unique experience in the sense of experiencing the best of both worlds, experiencing analog, digital. We went outside, but also had game systems. We experienced community through family reunions, neighborhood cookouts, church events, even for those who weren't religious, showing up only for Easter and revival, to now where we see the U.S. has become very individualized, and that has trickled down to the black community. Younger millennials and Gen Zs don't want to be bothered with nobody. They find pride in their excessive solitude, so-called introverted personalities, when most people are ambiverts, that's another story for another day, and their self-diagnosed mental illnesses. We have always been communal people as our past circumstances required it. But as black people progress, I think it's safe to say there has been an increase assimilation into white America. Our economic system plays a major role in that too. We all participate in capitalism because, we have to, but at different levels. There are many black people obsessed with having a seat at the table that they will either totally disassociate themselves from blackness, or they'll become the infiltrators cosplaying black empowerment. Don't be fooled by the freeform locks, dashikis, and kufis.
Do my eyes not deceive me, or am I looking at the goddess Isis herself? Can you do me a favor, my brown skin angel? Can you tap that white cow for me? My milk of magnesium. Oh. After the devil made you, he broke the mold.
People don't trust the church. Every time during the election year, we are guaranteed to see a step-and-fetch-it minister bowing at the feet of these political leaders that don't give a damn about us. All in all, the black church sold out. Truth be told, the church needs to move away from politics in the sense of not endorsing political candidates. I understand the historical reasons for this happening, but it should stop now. Activism is still important though, and black churches should support movements that will be beneficial for the community without endorsing candidates. That's just my opinion. We have lost the centralized space for community organizing. While yes, we have social media, but I believe, that this is the reason we are not taken seriously sometimes when it comes to organizing. I think social media is a great tool, but we are telling too much of our business on it. When so-called boycotts are planned, it's never led with strategy and comes off trivial and performative. We need safe physical space as well. And might I add, y'all might feel some type of way about this, but I agree with Tabitha Brown when it comes to the whole Target thing. I do believe, yes, at first glance, it came off as y'all not about to F up my coins, wrapped up in a pretty bow. After listening to her explain it more in depth, I get it. Pastor Jamal Bryant, who is leading the boycott, should have reached out to the black businesses in that store. Learn about their role. Is their product licensed or do they own their own brand? Strategize with them to mitigate risk. While it's understood sacrifices are made during resistance movements, it'd have been nice to let them in on it. Reverend Al Sharpton is assisting with the boycott, I believe, and he should know better. Then again, let's move on. Intergenerational bonding and respect are diminishing. Cultural traditions as well. I do know some of that is due to the weakening of trust some people have in the church. Food banks are far and few depending on where you are geographically. And also, do churches still collab? While I do understand many are struggling to maintain, is there a way for them to come together for the betterment of the community to assist where needed, or are there too many, egos involved for it to work? I don't know. I'm asking y'all. Y'all let me know. Many of our so-called leaders are paid puppets. They have sold out for their own financial comfort and pseudo power. They promote a false sense of hope while behind closed doors are backed by machines that don't want black people to get too radical or gain too much power, or should I say, realize our power. They're okay with us having a select few in certain positions, but we bet not dare get too ahead of ourselves. Malcolm X has spoken on this. Civil rights leaders, aka the Big Six, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., James Farmer, John Lewis, A. Philip Randolph, Roy Wilkins, and Whitney Young allegedly took money from white liberals to keep the blacks in line.
That this black steamroller was going to come down on the Capitol, they called in Wilkins. They called in Randolph. They called in these national Negro leaders that you respect and told them, call it off. Kennedy said, look, y'all letting this thing go too far. And old Tom said, boss, I can't stop it because I didn't start it. I'm telling you what they said. They said, I'm not even in it, much less at the head of it. They said, these Negroes are doing things on their own. They're running ahead of us. And that old shrewd fox, he said, well, if you all aren't in it, I'll put you in it. I'll put you at the head of it. I'll endorse it. I'll welcome it. I'll help it. I'll join it. A matter of hours went by. They had a meeting at the Carlisle Hotel in New York City. The Carlisle Hotel is owned by the Kennedy family. That's the hotel Kennedy spent the night at 2 nights ago. Belongs to his family. A philanthropic society headed by a white man named Stephen Currier called all the top civil rights leaders together at the Carlisle Hotel and told them that by you all fighting each other, you're destroying the civil rights movement. And since you're fighting over money from white liberals, let us set up what's known as the Council for United Civil Rights Leadership. Let's form this council, and all the civil rights organizations will belong to it. And we'll use it for fundraising purposes. Let me show you how tricky the white man is. And as soon as they got it formed, they elected Whitney Young as the chairman. And who do you think became the co-chairman? Stephen Currier, the white man. I'm telling you there. Howell was talking about it down at the Como today. This is what he was talking about. Howell knows it happened. Randolph knows it happened. Wilkins knows it happened. King knows it happened. Every one of that so-called Big Six. They know what happened. Once they formed it, with the white man over it, he promised them and gave them $800,000 to split up between the Big Six. And told them that after the march was over, they'd give them $700,000 more. $1.5 million split up between the leaders that you've been following, going to jail for, crying crocodile tears for. And they'd nothing but Frank James and Jesse James and brothers.
In 1963, black people wanted to disrupt the system militantly and forcefully, but instead were encouraged to march peacefully. Close to his demise, Dr. King started to broaden his perspective on the movement, focusing more on economic justice, and it is argued that that is the real reason he was taken out. I want to add, I am not one of those people that like to yell, we are not our ancestors. I think that statement in the context is typically used in is highly disrespectful. While yes, in retrospect, we can find errors in some of the rhetoric and strategies demonstrated, but we were not there. And I cannot even fathom going through half of what they did. We can critique respectfully, but these Negroes now, different story. The Black church is not well. It is not okay. When it comes to mental and emotional wellness, I think this is where many drop the ball. Members and non-members often seek counsel from the pastor or other church leaders to help guide them through whatever trials and tribulations they may be facing. Truth is, many of them are not qualified to advise. While it's understood this is church and some biblical reference is expected, I don't want to hear that the whole session. I have experienced this in the past where an elder of the church was supposed to be counseling me through my situation at the time. She sat there stone-faced and she listened just to tell me to pray about it. She never followed up, never gave emotional support or resources during or after the situation ended. She lacked empathy, and because she is an elder, she's probably, felt it was my fault anyway. That's all I'm going to give y'all on that, without telling all my business. The Black church has not been good when it comes to counseling. And if your church has, kudos to y'all, but I'm speaking from a general perspective. There is less space for grief, stress, and trauma support. Partly because in too many cases, the people causing the trauma are protected. Let that sink in. So the Black church has been declining in more ways than one. Shout out to the churches who were able to evolve and adapt by having service virtually. However, I do think in order to get back to the community and unity mindset of our ancestors, we must actually show up. If you are a Christian, of course, Physical interaction is so important for our overall wellness. Yes, even for, you self-proclaimed introverts, this is not just for church members. It's for all of us. Community building is important, whether it's religion, spirituality, social, or business networking. We have to go outside sometimes. Adapting to the current social and cultural climate is imperative to the Black community. We should be able to have a common goal, and we should not disassociate ourselves from people just because they have different spiritual beliefs. Believe it or not, I just don't see this from Christians. I see this from people in the spiritual community as well. They sit on their high horses just as much and unconstructively criticize Christians for believing in the oppressor's God. And Christians deem everything demonic, yet still around here fornicating, gluttony as hell, and lying through their teeth. Listen. What I'm saying is we need to find common ground and unify. The Black church is not okay, and sometimes I feel as a whole the Black community isn't either. So when we talk about the decline of the Black church, it's not just about empty pews. It's about what happens to us as a people when one of our oldest backbones starts to weaken. The church gave us music, movements, food for the hungry, safe spaces to organize, and a sense of belonging. But with gentrification, shifting beliefs, economic struggle, and straight up mistrust, that foundation is cracking. Much of the problem is when people want to unify, they have a hard time doing so with people whose religious, sexual preference, and cultural and social economic background differs from them. To unify doesn't mean we have to become a monolith. It just means we gotta have some type of code we stand on when it comes to the liberation and wellness of our community. But too many of us don't want to change the rules of the game. We just want a chance to become the dealer. Black capitalism won't save us. Here's the thing. Whether you go to church every Sunday, watch online, or don't step foot in one at all, the decline affects us all. Because if the Black church isn't holding that central role anymore, then we need to think about what fills that space. In my opinion, I think regardless if you agree with Christianity or not, there is a need for healthy Black churches. I do, however, believe society may have outgrown them being the center of our community due to our diversity, grassroots groups, social and business networks, cultural organizations, or even new spiritual spaces should be considered. And everything shouldn't have to cost, or at least make the cost reasonable, and be transparent about how the money benefits the organization. But whatever it is, we have to show up physically sometimes, not just on social media. We need safe spaces where we can build, heal, and pass on culture face to face. And we've got to find ways to unify across differences. Christian, Muslim, spiritual, or none of the above, because the real goal is keeping our community connected and strong. So let me ask you this. If the church isn't the backbone it once was, what do you think should take its place? Or maybe you feel like the church can still evolve and reclaim that role. At the end of the day, the conversation doesn't stop here. It continues with y'all in the comments. So if this video got you thinking, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, be beautiful, be Black, and bold with it, and be you always.
What if God is unhappy without praise? What if He is not pleased with the words we say? What if He takes away